Thank you. I'm Andrew Adonis. 10 years ago, I was Transport Minister when they called me the thin controller for reasons I can't begin to fathom. My aim is to visit every railway station in the southwest of England as part of my campaign, and I've done about a third so far. And if I'm elected your MP, I want to do them all. We need much, much better transport connections, and we need to invest big time in green transport across the region. What do I think about the European elections? They are effectively a referendum on Brexit. Whether people voted leave or remain 3 years ago, it's been a disaster since. We've had 3 years of negotiations which have produced what everyone accepts is a poor deal. It doesn't live up to the claims that were made 3 years ago that could be delivered. Do you remember the bus, 350 million a week we would get for the NHS, the easiest trade deals in history, all of that? It hasn't happened. There's no point going into why it hasn't happened. I think Theresa May has tried her best, but it hasn't happened. And I believe that the right thing for the country, now that we can see the deal on the table, now that we can see that the unicorns that were chasing around 3 years ago don't exist, is to put it back to the people and give the people the choice of whether they want this deal, whether they want Brexit, or whether they want to remain. And why do I think we should remain? It's the right thing for our economy and jobs, because any form of Brexit will leave us poorer. It's the right thing for Ireland, and do not underestimate the importance of peace in Ireland. The Good Friday Agreement is one of the best things that we have done as a country. You cannot have the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland in different trade and immigration systems and not have a hard border. The best thing to do is to stay in the European Union. It's the right thing for our young people and the next generation, because they want to be able to work, love, live, travel, settle across the whole of the continent of Europe and not be, as one of them put it to me recently, shut up on a small island with Jacob Rees-Mogg, Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage. And also, seriously, the European Union is the best peace project in the history of Europe, and do not play fast and loose with the peace and security of this country. So,
Andrew, got to stop you there.
Stay in the European Union and have a second referendum. Can I join Molly and say I fundamentally disagree with Anne Widdecombe? The reason we are not addressing the big social problems The reason we are not addressing the big social problems facing the country at the moment is because of Brexit. We have just spent £4 billion preparing for a no-deal Brexit, which the Prime Minister has scrapped. That was Chris Grayling's ferry companies with no ferries, compensating Eurotunnel, which wasn't able to compete in the contracts, and so on and so on. What we should be doing is not doing Brexit and instead tackling the big underlying social problems, which we will not tackle if we spend the next 10, 15, 20 years renegotiating 73 trade agreements, not only with the European Union, but with all the other countries with which we trade, courtesy of trade agreements with the EU. And what should we be doing instead? One, we should end austerity. Austerity is the big underlying austerity. There has been a 49% real terms cut in local authority budgets by the Tories since 2010. That should be ended, and then a lot of the underlying pressure towards Brexit would stop. Secondly, what we should do, is invest in our public services. A better NHS, a better education system. Thirdly, we should get real about the climate challenge that we face, where we and the Greens see eye to eye on the need to get real about tackling the climate emergency. And fourthly, we need to hand more power down in our country. Too many decisions in this country are taken in Westminster and Whitehall. We need radical devolution. If I'm privileged to be your MEP, my aim in Brussels will be in every respect to be the exact opposite of Nigel Farage. Thank you very much. I will turn up to the European Parliament. I will not claim a salary for doing no work. I will not insult and be rude to all of our European friends and partners. I will battle on behalf of Britain's interests and not seek to undermine them. I will not be xenophobic. I will stand by the rights of all nationalities. And I also make two Two further commitments to you. I will constantly report back to you on what I'm doing. I think we should do town hall meetings like this week in, week out, so that we can connect Brussels with the people, firstly. And secondly, I will battle on your behalf to bring jobs and industries to this region, because Brexit is decimating the big industries of this region, the car manufacturing industry, the aviation industry, and I will bring jobs here and not, like Nigel Farage, export them to other countries, because he is making this a place where we can no longer do business. Obviously, there are lots of priorities, and you want your leaders to deal with them all. But in my view, the biggest scourge on our society at the moment is the dramatic rise in homelessness and the demand for food banks, even here in Bournemouth and places which, looked at nationally, are reasonably well off. We should end that. Everyone should have a right to somewhere to live. We should dramatically increase the rate of home building, including home building for social rents, at affordable rents, which simply isn't available at the moment. We are only building 1/10 as many social homes as we were 30 years ago. We're supposed to be becoming more civilised. We're becoming less civilised. Let's end homelessness, let's end food banks, and let's not spend 39 billion pounds on a Brexit, which means that we can't afford to do any of that. I think there are one or two things that have to be said about the referendum 3 years ago. There are big questions about the legality of the referendum 3 years ago that still have not been cleared up. The Electoral Commission has reported on multiple and huge breaches of the law by the Leave campaign, including Aaron Banks's, I know some people don't want to hear this, but I'm afraid that these are the facts, including the £8 million donation by Aaron Banks, the largest donation in the history of British politics, which the National Crime Agency is currently looking at. I think the National Crime Agency should get a move on, and it should report so that we don't have as much illegality on the part of the Leave campaign next time as last time. I think also, calling a spade, a whole lot of untruths were told by the Leave campaign last time. The £350 million a week for the NHS, not true. Do you remember the easiest trade deals in history that were going to be signed a minute after Brexit? None of them are ready yet. We were told by Boris Johnson we'd be staying in the customs union and the single market, then we were leaving them the day after. The fact is, people were not straight and honest last time. Next time we expect better, and I'm convinced that on the facts, in particular the facts of Theresa May's deal, next time the result will be very different.
Thank you.
Can I say, and can I give you a commitment, that if I'm elected as your MEP, I will fight tooth and nail against Nigel Farage's policy to privatise the National Health Service. I think that is, and it is very important to understand. It is very important to understand that, as Nigel Lawson, the godfather of Brexit, said, after the referendum 3 years ago, Brexit is the opportunity to complete the Thatcher revolution, which is part of the reason why Anne Widdecombe is standing as a candidate for them today, because that is precisely what she wants to do. I do not think we should dismantle the NHS or our public services. I think we should invest in the NHS, have a better NHS, include social care in the NHS at the moment, because at the moment it doesn't, which means old people are vulnerable and alone and not protected. We should have rising school budgets, not falling school budgets. We should be building new social homes, not throwing the homeless onto the street. Then we will be a civilised society. Can I say, it's fitting to say this in a church, that in the last referendum, I thought on the Remain side of the argument, the best video made by far, and the one that had the largest number of hits, was Gordon Brown walking through the ruins of Coventry Cathedral under the slogan, "Lead, not leave." And that is what we should be doing as a country. We should be leading, not leaving in Europe, not least to maintain the peace and the security and the stability of Europe, which are crucially tied into our collective membership of both NATO and the European Union, which are two sides of the same coin, because security and prosperity always go hand in hand. And when you undermine prosperity, security is the next thing that falls. And when we heard, and I thought what Cal said earlier about the Balkans was extremely moving. Remember, the reason why the Balkans fell apart is they were in neither NATO nor the European Union. What every country that has come to democracy in Europe, whether it be in the former Soviet Union or in the Balkans, what they have all wanted as they have come out of a colonial relationship with whether it be Russia or with the former Yugoslavia, what they've all wanted is to join both NATO and the European Union, the two together. And if you don't believe the seriousness of the threat, look at what is happening at the moment in Ukraine. Half of it invaded by Russia, the other half threatened by Russia. Do not imperil our security. What we should do is lead, not leave.
Molly?
Can I say, I agree with virtually everything that Molly said. I was the Transport Minister that gave a really big boost to the electrification of the railways. We have less of our intercity network electrified than any other major European country, and we should put that right. We should have a big move towards electric vehicles. The National Infrastructure Commission, which I used to chair, said 2 days ago that we should have near universal electric vehicles by 2030, and I agree with that. We should give people time to transition, and we should give incentives, but that should happen. And then we need to have a much, much greener way of generating our electricity, and I strongly agree with what Molly said about a big, big move towards renewables. For example, offshore wind power, which was much derided 20 years ago, is now one of the cheapest and most effective and efficient forms of electricity generation. We need much more attention to practical policies of this kind in tandem with Europe-wide targets, and of course it was the last Labour government that introduced the first binding carbon reduction targets, and we need to see those much tougher, and we need to work across parties, across countries, within the European Union to bring all this about. It's an argument for leading, not leaving. Stop Farage, stop Brexit, remain Labour.